The federal government is moving to temporarily cap the number of international students allowed to study in Canada. According to the feds, the new rules could result in a 35% drop in the amount of new student visas issued this year. Wasima Juma is with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. She joins us now with more on this. Wasima, what has been the reaction from students to the possibility of these new rules?
Perfect. Yeah, I think when the news dropped, students were still absorbing what the information was and what it entails. But a week from here, I think the reviews are definitely a little bit mixed, where we hear from some students that the fact that the measures are temporary is optimistic in a way that the government is listening, but are looking to find solutions to the root cause problem. But also wanted to highlight that the current students right now have concerns about the cap in terms of if that is to lead to a drop in revenue for post-secondary institution, who is going to take up the burden of that extra cost. So there's definitely a mixed sentiments from students, but overall at CASA, we are happy to see that it's a temporary measure because that gives us room to keep on working on this, but I think we still need to address some concerns that arise for our current student, but also what does that imply for the future of the sector in the country.
And speaking of those concerns, so looking at the cap in effect for the next 2 years, what changes would you like to see during that time?
I would say better funding for post-secondary institutions. That's something that I think when we look at this cause, it's really the deep root cause of how the sector is doing. So we just ask that provinces step up and invest a little bit more in their post-secondary institutions so that the cost doesn't fall on students to pay for that. Because when we look at higher costs of international student fees, they are paying for that lack of funding. So we are hoping that with this cap and with the collaboration between federal and provincial government, we also see an increase in public funding for institutions.
And we know British Columbia just put a 2-year ban on new colleges enrolling international students. That province says some schools just aren't meeting government expectations. Does Canada need higher standards for its post-secondary institutions across the board?
I would say in terms of at CASA, we really do focus on the high quality education that we are providing, especially if we are asking international students to leave their home country and come and study here. So there definitely needs to be regulation in terms of what means a good high quality education. But again, I think that also falls within the provinces. So we would hope that there's better collaboration between the federal government and provinces to ensure that high quality education remains at the forefront when they are accepting international students, but also domestic students into their institutions.
I appreciate your take. That's Wasima Juma with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown has also been very vocal on this issue. He joins us now from Brampton City Hall. Thanks for speaking with us today, Mayor Brown.
My pleasure.
Now, in your view, is this temporary cap a good move by the federal government?
I believe it is. The program is broken. Right now, we see international students being taken advantage of, living in horrendous conditions, and it has essentially become an ATM for academic institutions. And that's not the intention. We need to align this international student program with the available housing we have. And that's why I think this pause is very helpful, so we can recalibrate this program and make it work.
So what kind of changes do you think need to happen over the next 24 months to better support students?
So, I realize that colleges and universities are not going to build their own student housing, but they can work with private sector partners to do so. If you're going to be taking in 5,000 international students, then have a plan for where they're going to be housed. Just a few days ago in Brampton, I got a report from Bylaw where they found 25 students living in a single basement apartment. Right now, we see international students living in fire traps, extremely dangerous living conditions. And if the colleges took the time to build student housing, we wouldn't have that issue. And so I really want to see an alignment with the international student visa approval process, that there would be a housing address associated with it. So if you have a plan to pay for tuition, there should also be a plan to be able to pay for proper housing.
Now, in kind of a wider sense, will these rules help to ease the housing crunch in your city?
It will, because it will encourage the building of new housing, housing that is catered to students. And what's really interesting, I've already had 3 academic institutions in Brampton come into my office to tell me about how they're working on building student housing, just because of all the buzz around this topic in the recent months. So I think it's already having the desired effect. I think you're going to see for the first time a real effort to build student housing.
Now, you kind of mentioned this already. Schools, you say, are using some international students basically as an ATM. So this change in the rules could bring down the amount of international students by 35% this year. Are post-secondary schools prepared for that decline?
So whatever financial arrangements universities and colleges have with their respective provinces is really a separate subject than appropriate housing. The current situation is broken. We can't have 25 students living in a basement apartment. That is not, how we've envisioned our international student program. And so I really believe if there's a temporary decline, then that's just going to result in students not being taken advantage of. And hopefully, in this period, in this pause, you'll see this program fixed and integrity brought back to it.
Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.